Hello everyone and welcome to our new video. We are starting unit 2. So we have finished biomolecules and enzymes and we are moving on to cells. So now that we know the most important molecules for life are for biomolecules and how enzymes help us in chemical reactions because they are a very important molecule. It's a protein, so it's one of our 4 biomolecules. Now we're going to go into detail about cells and life in general. So let's begin. Okay, so unit 2. Some of the most important questions that we will be answering here, and these are the 3 questions that you're going to need to have in your notebook under our questions for the unit. What are the different types of cell transport and the similarities and differences between them, the structure of the cell membrane, and how it allows for movement of molecules, and the different types of transport that are needed to help maintain equilibrium in the cell. However, in this first part today, we're going to get some background knowledge on cells themselves. So life is cellular. And I'm going to ask you guys to watch this video as well. So that's going to give you a little bit of history on cell theory. I'm not going to put it in this video, but I'll link it in the card. I do need you guys to watch that video as well. So in this unit, we're going to be zooming in to the processes happening within a cell, okay? And specifically today, we're going to talk about the cell, which is, of course, the smallest unit of every living organism. So remember, atoms are the smallest unit of everything, of matter. Cells are the smallest unit of living things. So for something to be considered living, it has to have cells, okay? The different parts of the cell are not technically living. They make up the cell, and once they're all together in a cell, it's a living thing. The parts themselves without each other are not a living thing, okay? So that's where we get cell theory. We start getting into how do we know if something is alive, right? So there's 3 concepts in cell theory. Number 1 is that all living things are composed of 1 or more cells. So they're single-celled organisms, some amoebas, for example. Number 2 is that cells are basic units of structure and function in living things. 3 is that all cells come from pre-existing cells. You can't make cells out of nothing, okay? So for us to evolve, there needs to be a cell that started things, right? So from a cell comes the next cell. They reproduce from each other. You can't make a cell out of nothing. You need to have a cell to create more cells. We cannot create cells out of nothing. I cannot express that enough. You can't make it out of thin air. We can't just put a bunch of ingredients together and make a cell. Your cells come from pre-existing cells. If there's no pre-existing cell, we can't make new cells out of anything. Now the cells are going to have something called organelles. So in 7th grade or 6th grade or whenever you had this, you learned that the body has different organs, right? So cells have different organelles. That's what we call them. That's just the parts of the cell. Each part has a different function. So these are some of the basic things that you're going to need to remember. So all of this is going to be very important. Yes, we're going to add this to our notebook as well. Cell membrane is what is going to control what goes in and out of the cell. So all of these cell functions and cell parts you should be completely familiar with, just in case. They're here for you to learn. Now, there are more cell parts, but these are the ones that are present in basically every cell. So we have our cell membrane controlling what goes in and out. And we also have something called the nuclear membrane. If the nucleus has a membrane, that is what's going to be controlling what goes in and out of the nucleus itself. So we have the cell membrane covering the entire cell, and the nuclear membrane only protects the nucleus. Then we have the nucleus itself is the control center of the cell. So that's basically the brain of the cell. That is where we find everything that controls everything else in the cell. Within the nucleus, we have the chromosomes, which are what house the genetic information in the nucleus. So humans have chromosomes, and you should have learned about that in 7th grade. And those chromosomes are what house our DNA, which we will get into more detail later on. Our endoplasmic reticulum is the transport system in the cell. So that's kind of like the mailman in the cell. The ribosomes are the organelles that make proteins. The Golgi bodies are the organelles that package the proteins. So think of the ribosome as all the independent sellers on Amazon. And then the Golgi bodies is the Amazon warehouse where they get packaged. And then the endoplasmic reticulum is the Amazon delivery drivers taking them where they need to go. Okay. The vacuole is basically like a little bag that stores water, waste, food. So anything that the cell needs or needs to place somewhere. The lysosomes are what's used to break down old parts in the cell that are no longer needed. For example, things that are going to end up being waste, it breaks them down and then they go to the vacuoles. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, as you should know. Basically, though, it is providing the energy. And the process that takes place in the mitochondria that provides the energy is called cellular respiration, and we will get into that later on. So be on the lookout for that. So these are some examples of cells. We have the animal cell, the plant cell, and the bacteria cell. So my mouse here, yes, okay. So the animal cell, you can tell there is no set shape because it's a membrane, it's fluid, it doesn't have a set shape, and it's going to depend on the animal what it kind of looks like. So the cell membrane is this outer layer protecting all the organelles. Then within the cell membrane, we have the cytoplasm, which is kind of like a jelly fluid in which everything else just kind of floats around. We have the Golgi bodies over here. These are these pink things. Then we have the mitochondria, are these blue ones. You will notice that they have kind of like a zigzag pattern inside. We have this other area that kind of looks like the Golgi complex, but it's a different color. These are our ribosomes and the endoplasmic reticulum. So the closer we are to the nucleus, they're the endoplasmic reticulum. Farther away, that's the ribosomes. We have our vacuoles, are these little holes in the animal cell, and in the plant cell, you'll notice there's one large vacuole instead of a bunch of tiny little ones. We have the nucleus, is this whole center part. The nucleolus is the center of the nucleus, and roaming around the nucleolus are the chromosomes with the genetic information. Now the plant cell does have some similarities. Like I said, there is vacuole, but it's a large one instead of a bunch of tiny ones. The chloroplast is something that was not in the animal cell. Chloroplast is where the plants are able to make their own food through photosynthesis. That's also what gives them their green color. So They're usually in green in the pictures. If they're not in color, you'll also see that it's like they have a lot of little coins inside. That's your chloroplast. There's also ribosomes and Golgi complex and cytoplasm and cell membrane. There is a cell membrane right here, but there's an outside layer giving it more structure, and that is your cell wall. Sometimes you'll see these little things sticking out. That's called plasmodesma. You don't have to worry too much about that, at least not for our biology course. If you go into becoming a biologist or somewhere where you'll need more biology in your college career, then you'll go more into detail of everything around that. But as of right now, just know that's what it is if there's something there. So the two things that the plant cells have that the animal cells do not are the chloroplast and the cell wall. So that's why the plant cells usually look rectangular or some kind of rigid shape. That is due to the cell wall. Now the bacteria cells are quite interesting. They do have DNA information. They do have a chromosome, but they don't have a lot of other things. They do have cell walls and cell membranes, but it's basically a pill with just cell walls, membranes, cytoplasm, and the chromosomes floating around freely, and some ribosomes as well. And then sometimes it has these tails. The tails in the bacteria cells are called flagella. It's just kind of sensors and receptors. Now, all three of these have a lot of similarities, but they also have some differences. As you can tell, both the animal and the plant cell have a nucleus. The bacteria cell does not, and that's what makes the biggest difference. There's two types of cells. We have the eukaryotic cells and the prokaryotic cells. So eukaryotic, think of you. You are a human, you have an animal cell. Therefore, animal cells are eukaryotic, and they have a nucleus. Their DNA is in their nucleus. They have membrane-bound organelles, right? For example, the mitochondria, it has its own little membrane taking care of it. They're also a lot bigger. And plant cells also are included in the eukaryotic cells because they also have membrane-bound organelles and a nucleus. However, the prokaryotic cells are the ones that don't have membrane-bound nuclei. They have free-floating DNA all throughout the cell. So they don't have those membrane-bound organelles like the mitochondria and the chloroplast and all those. They just have their DNA floating around. They're simpler cells, like, for example, the bacteria cell. Those are the only ones that we talk about that are prokaryotic, okay? Bacteria cells are the simple cells. They are prokaryotic. In their DNA, they do have DNA, but it's free floating. In their cytoplasm, they don't have a nucleus to contain it. So here's the main difference. These eukaryotic cells have your nucleus. The prokaryotic cells have their DNA floating around. So these are the main similarities and differences between them. Like I said, there is a cell membrane, there is cytoplasm, there is DNA, there's ribosomes. Other than that, they don't share a lot. The place where the DNA is housed is not there for the prokaryotic cells. Bacteria is the only example that we have. They are smaller and simpler cells. The DNA floats freely and they are simple, yes. Whereas the eukaryotic cells are way larger, they have their DNA in their nucleus, they have a nucleus. They are much more complex, they have membrane-bound organelles. The examples are plants, animals, fungi. And that's it for this video. So let me know if you have any questions in class. This should be review information, so I sped through it a little quickly. If you are having trouble remembering the functions of the cells, I will have a Quizlet for you, so make sure you study that because you will be quizzed on that, okay? That is it for me today. I'll see you in class. Bye.